Welcome to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors. Dr. Allen chats with successful investors exploring their journey from setback to triumph. Through this window, we glimpse the truths that inspire our guests to invest abundantly and flourish in all areas of life. And now your host, Dr. Allen.
Hello and welcome to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors. I'm your host, Dr. Allen. Today's guest is co-founder at Lyon Property Management. Since launching Lyon Property Management in 2015, his company has grown to manage 700 units in Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts. He bought his first multifamily in 2012 at the age of 23. Welcome our guest today, Jimmy Murray.
Alan, thanks for having me. Excited to connect and hopefully able to share some great stories with your listeners.
Well, I'm sure you've got plenty of good stories to share, and I'm looking forward to hearing those great stories.
Absolutely.
We were able to connect about a month ago, and so I'm interested to find out what has happened in between now and last month here. But before we get into that, let's take a trip back in time to a time in your childhood that you can look back on now and say that really was a formative experience that helped me to be who I am today.
Yeah, so honestly, I know it's going to sound a little bit cliche, but a lot of my most formative experiences came via the hands of my father, right? In a good way. I think back about a lot of what most of you as simple advice is still advice that I still apply to this day. So I can remember I was 8 years old and in my first Little League game, and I get up for my first at-bat, and I struck out. And I came back and, my head's down, I'm walking back to the dugout, and my dad pulls me aside, right? So I think like the biggest thing when you talk to kids, you need to get down on their level, and I think it helps them understand. So he's always very good at that. He gets down on my level and he's like, "What's the matter?" I said, "I struck out, I want to get up there, I want to get on base." And he said, "Listen, the one thing that you have to remember is that your name is James Edward Murray II, and you can do anything you set your mind to." And, that's a mentality that still lives with me to this day. And I think that's really important, that as cliche as it sounds, it is the God's honest truth, right? If you put your mind to it, you can achieve anything. It may take you some time, it may take a little bit of hard work, but you can absolutely leverage that to achieve whatever you want.
That is so true. I mean, I see it time and time again. It is a person's conception of who and what they are that either propels them or puts the stops on where it is that they can and want to go in life.
Absolutely.
Well, that's an interesting story there, and I'm glad that you had a father who could get down on your level and actually get that message across to you.
Absolutely.
As you think back on that time, when you heard that message at that particular time in your life, how did you feel right at that particular moment?
You know what? I can't recall. But I know like one of the biggest things, and I'm a father now, and I see it in my little guy. I think one of the biggest things is just knowing that you have somebody to support you, right? So it's amazing how like when you're younger, the things that kind of bother you or put you off, like striking out at home plate, to how they grow into some of the difficulties we face as adults. But I think it all comes down to support and knowing that you have a support system. So I always felt incredible support from my dad, and I would imagine that that's what I felt in that moment. Just knowing that, one strikeout isn't a forever thing, and I got a chance to get back up the plate a couple innings later. And honestly, I don't remember what I did in my second at bat, but just knowing that I had support was always awesome for me as a kid.
Well, it's interesting that's that it's his words that you remember from that moment, and not really the experience itself, but the words.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us about a major fork in the road that you have come to, and taking the route that you took has made all the difference in your life.
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me has been a personal battle over the last few years, and it made me really kind of double back and help me remember who I was after I got through some of the personal struggles. So I think it's really important. I know one of the biggest challenges in my life throughout everything is, I've always struggled to quit things, things that maybe aren't beneficial to me or are actually detrimental to be a part of. So through a personal battle, I actually worked through a fair amount of therapy sessions to kind of get better at quitting so that I could focus my energy on the things that I really wanted to accomplish. So that's been kind of the fork in the road over the last 2 years for me.
Can you share with us some of the specifics about that?
Absolutely. So I've always been a huge mindset guy. So as early as 8 years old, when my dad's trying to like sculpt that mindset, and then continuing through, when we launched Lyon Property Management, our turning point came in August of 2017, where I came across The Secret. So The Secret is a book written by Rhonda Byrne, and what it talks about is every day you wake up, you set that antenna, and that's what the universe attracts to you, right? So honestly, so I went through a personal battle with divorce, where I was in an abusive relationship, and it really caused a detriment to my mindset. And prior to going through all this, I never thought that anyone could break my mindset. I thought that that is something that I would always have. And honestly, it's true. Like I'll always have it, but I've got to believe in it myself, right? So through those personal struggles, it definitely caused me to take a step back and kind of forget who I was. So through therapy and reading and just like being true to who I am, that's allowed me to redirect, to get back on top of my game like I was a few years ago before I started going through this.
Well, when you're in really what are oftentimes termed codependent relationships, it's very difficult to see outside of that box and to see that there are issues there that you need to address. How did you come to that point and place that you said, yeah, this just is not working, I have to do something?
Yeah, so my thing is accountability, right? So I think that if we're going to have a certain level of standards for ourselves, let me try and retract that. A major pet peeve of mine is when people hold themselves to different standards than they hold us to. They hold themselves to a lower standard than they may hold someone else. So in my mind, we should always hold ourselves to the same, if not a higher standard of what we hold others. And there was just a huge double standard in that relationship, whereas a one-way street. That caused me to kind of re-examine and kind of aided in that quitting process, so to speak.
How did you actually identify that there was that disequilibrium there?
Yeah, so I guess one of the biggest things, and I'm going to go back to my dad. So here's another baseball story that's really good. So prior to that, first at bat, when I was 8 years old, we sat down at the first practice, and my dad said, "Hey, listen," he goes, "there's no I in team." And he gave that whole no I in team speech. And I'm the wise guy. I raised my hand. I'm like, well, if you rearrange the letters, there's a me there. And I ran for the rest of practice. And that's what I realized in that relationship, is that there was an I in team, and that it was all for her and things that she wanted. And, there was no team. It was really codependent, like you say, where it was all directed. But it should be, and in real estate investing as well, like it all shall be together in teamwork. Like one of my partners jokes that real estate investing is a team sport. And I find that to be absolutely true. Because together we can all bring each other up. Maybe one person has access to money, one person has access to the deal, and one person knows how to operate the asset. I think that's really important, to make sure that everyone brings something to the table so that we can all hold each other accountable and work towards a common goal.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your personal experience because to do well in your business life, we have to get our personal lives together, and it is often our personal lives that actually get in the way of us succeeding in other aspects of our life.
Absolutely.
And I know it takes courage to share those things, those personal things. So I really appreciate you sharing those.
Most definitely.
So you came to the decision to leave that relationship. It's one thing to make that decision. It's another thing to move on from that. Tell us a little bit about that journey and how you actually made the decision, and then you made the journey to actually in the relationship?
Yeah, so it was difficult, but there were a couple events that had transpired that just led me to move on. But honestly, it took me a while to regain the mindset. So
Hmm.
recently, I actually came across a program called 75 Hard. It's a program put out by Andy Frisella. Andy Frisella, I think at one time had the number one entrepreneurship podcast on iTunes. And Andy has developed this program, and he calls it a program to help you resharpen the spare, right? So to bring you back to kind of that warrior mindset. And about a week and a half ago, I wrapped up that program. But that program helped me reprogram my level of discipline, and through that discipline has helped me regain my mindset. So I think that is really important, that as you go through these difficult things, when you make the decision, try to stay focused on that self-care as well. So this program, even though it was incredibly difficult, and some people probably think that I was crazy for doing it, it was incredibly difficult. I was able to work through it, but it was a level of self-care to help me regain that level of discipline so that I could have success in the areas of my life that I chose.
Yeah, that aspect of self-care. A lot of people have difficulty with that, particularly coming out of those types of relationships where you had accustomed yourself to taking care of others in place of yourself, and it coming back to a point in place of taking care of yourself, it seems like a selfish thing to do. I just I don't know. I heard from one of my guests. I can't remember exactly who it was. That actually, loving self uh, is not selfish. Loving self is sanity, and
I feel that one. Yeah.
yeah, it takes. It's a long road to get there sometimes, particularly after having come out of abusive relationships.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us a little bit about the uh, the business that you are in now, because you are doing some interesting things that are a little bit out of the mainstream of multifamily investing. So, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So honestly, our biggest approach at Lyon Property Management is to be a strategic partner of sorts, right? So when somebody comes in, it's not just a matter of onboarding a new client and collecting rents. There are levels to how we're going to onboard that client depending on specific needs in order to reach that strategic partner level. But when I talk with most investors, it's a screening process on our end too to make sure that they're a good fit to be a client, to make sure that the relationship is cohesive, make sure that we
Mhm.
share a similar investment strategy, right? So one of the biggest things, like when we onboard a new client and we go through that building, we're going to conduct a safety inspection. So that allows us to be a little bit nosy. What we tell the tenants is we're trying to make sure that you have a safe, comfortable place to live, but really allows us to get in, make sure that the rents are at market or slightly above. If not, then we'll provide an analysis to that client to say, hey, you brought us in and I think we can pay for ourselves based on these rent increases. And then if we end up increasing the rent and cause some turnover, we can start to estimate CapEx for that investor. But at the end of the day, what it all foots back to is making sure that we're able to deliver that ROI. Another instance where we step up as a property manager is on the insurance front. We want to make sure that clients have the right level of insurance. Locally in the Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts area, I found that clients go for the cheapest insurance policy, which isn't always the best. So I recognize that it's a game of dollars and cents. We're trying to make sure that you make the right level of net operating income on the building that you're buying. But if you're in not to go too deep, but if you're in, a lower priced insurance policy and a surplus policy, God forbid something happens and it's not covered, you could be in a very difficult position. The other point that we really try to help out with is financing. Having the right commercial lender on some of these large buildings could be what makes or breaks your success as an investor. So the biggest thing is I talk about the intangibles related to the management fee. We're not the cheapest property manager in Rhode Island. We're honestly middle of the road. But the intangibles that we bring to the table based on how we're going to help your asset perform and meet your investment guidelines is honestly like the secret sauce that other managers in the area aren't able to bring to the table based on our level of experience.
Interesting how you really work from a relationship perspective there. and work not only with the investors, but also work with the tenants to bring a mutual understanding there that benefits actually both parties there.
Absolutely.
In your own investment strategies, you also are doing some interesting things. So talk to us about that aspect.
Yeah. So in our local market, we have found that the prices at which multifamily properties are trading at are slightly above the values that we'd want to hold the properties at, but typically most need rehab. So where we found a niche in our local market is in flipping 3 to 4 unit multifamily buildings. One, there's a huge amount of inventory of those style of buildings. And then two is we found that in that price point in our local market, the properties move very fast on the back end. So we've come after these distressed properties. And what we'll do is we'll come in. We typically like buildings that have below market rents. We'll come in, increase the rents. Typically, one of the tenants will move. We'll rehab that unit, make sure that the rest of the infrastructure in the building is solid, and we'll put it back on the market. So now we've created essentially a house hack for an owner-occupied buyer in that lower price point of the market, and it's provided a good niche for us to be able to generate a strong kind of income outside of our standard course of business.
Well, what I like about your particular niche there is how you are just inadvertently, by helping someone to house hack, you're introducing another person to real estate investing who I suspect probably in most cases has never even given it any particular thought.
Absolutely. So that's kind of like goes back to my story. I honestly, when I bought my first house in November 2012, I literally had no idea what I was doing was called house hacking. No idea. And then I learned about it, and that's where I caught the real estate bug. But the house hacking term, 7 or 8 years ago, was not nearly as popular as it is now. But I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I feel that house hacking is the single best tool for young adults to build wealth.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's how I got started, and it just, I mean, you can buy a property that's overvalued and still come out ahead through a house hack.
Absolutely.
It's hard to lose in that kind of endeavor.
Most certainly.
So without any experience, without any knowledge of the industry, most people can come out ahead on that.
Yep.
Just by having somebody else pay your mortgage. I mean, it's just fantastic. And if you can a 3 or 4-plex, a duplex you could probably do it, but a 3 or 4-plex, it's almost certain to pay out in a positive way there.
Definitely.
So I really like your program. I think it's just a fantastic way to. It's obviously been profitable for you all and working out very well for you, but I just love the way it's really giving back and really helping other people.
Absolutely.
As well there. Well, Jimmy, tell us or tell our viewers and listeners how it is that they can connect with you.
Yep. So the best way to connect, if you're interested in our property management services, is to check out our website. It's Lyon, Lyon, propertygroup.com, and you can submit a contact form on there. If someone has a question in between time, the best way to reach me is on Instagram, and my handle on Instagram is the Notorious CFK.
The Notorious CFK. Tell us how that handle came about.
So this is a good story. So I always talk about kind of virtual mentors, people that I've never met. So, I mean, like folks, I'll drop some names. So like Gary Vaynerchuk taught me about social media marketing. Never met him, but I've learned some great things. Grant Cardone taught me how to sell, right? And I think he's probably taught a bunch of other folks, even though he's pretty notorious himself. I think about being a young kid, and I grew up playing a lot of baseball, and my mom used to let me listen to the Notorious B.I.G. And my favorite song by the Notorious B.I.G. is Juicy, and it talks about how he came from nothing and built this lifestyle through hard work to deliver to the world what he's really good at. And then the way that I learned about The Secret was from the Notorious MMA, Conor McGregor, and I recognize that he's another infamous character. So from learning about kind of vision from Notorious B.I.G. and his song Juicy to The Secret from Rhonda Byrne that I learned about through the Notorious MMA, I am the Notorious CFK, the cash flow king.
Oh, wonderful. One last question. What is your greatest personal asset, and how do you apply it to your business success?
I love that one. So another kind of virtual mentor. I love Eric Thomas. Eric Thomas, he's put out multiple tracks, tons of YouTube videos. He's got like a personal accountability group. But in one of his, I'm trying to think of what to call it, like one of his albums, he talks about, it's called In the Pocket. And he talks about how, the greatest quarterbacks in the NFL, they step into the pocket, they step into their protection when the pocket collapses. And in that 1 to 2 seconds, that's when they make that pass that goes down the field because the receiver opens up. Rather than stepping back out and running, they stick to passing the ball, what they're good at, what the play was intended to do. So with that, it kind of goes with your question about a lot of people when they're under pressure, they fold and they change their strategy. So as I'm listening to this track, like Eric Thomas talks about how he's loyal, so he always sticks with his team. And I think that my greatest asset, what I bring to the table, is hard work, right? Because I think that through hard work, if we continuously put in the work and put in the work and put in the work, it's going to help us fail a lot faster. But in those failures, we're going to learn. And through those learnings, that's going to lead to more opportunity and more wins in the long run. So I'm a huge believer in working really hard, and that's going to help you get to the life that you want to achieve.
Well, I would have guessed you would have said one of your greatest strengths is analysis, just from listening to you here today. Is that true? Is that one of your personal strengths?
Honestly, I'm a huge numbers nerd. I used to work for the largest private financial company in the world, and I'm not sure if I can name drop, but I was a financial analyst working for them, and I'm a huge numbers nerd. So if you send me a spreadsheet to crank numbers on a off-market deal or multifamily analysis, I love analyzing deals.
I thought it might be. But I'm sure you have other strengths as well, and you certainly do know how to put them to good use here. Well, Jimmy, it was a pleasure reconnecting with you once again here. And you have some wonderful, fascinating stories.
Appreciate that.
Thanks for being on the program today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Creekside Chats with successful multifamily real estate investors, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital. Steed Talker Capital works with both new and established investors nationwide, creating opportunities to flourish in all areas of life. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steed Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures great and small flourish abundantly. For resources to enhance your well-being through multifamily real estate investment, connect with us online at capital.steedtalker.com.